This is episode 400 of That Shakespeare Life.
I'm Bob Behrman. I used to be head of archives at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. I'm now an honorary research fellow at the University of Birmingham. And another great method for studying the life of William Shakespeare includes listening to this. It's That Shakespeare Life with my friend Cassidy Cash.
Welcome to That Shakespeare Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
In Hamlet, Claudius introduces Gertrude as, quote, our sometime sister, now our queen. This comes from Act 1 in Hamlet. It's a moment that reminds us how queenship stood at the heart of dynastic politics. Court performance and cultural identity in Shakespeare's England were all influenced by the idea of who was queen. Just as Shakespeare placed a Danish queen at the center of his most famous tragedy, so too did the real Danish queen, Anne of Denmark, wife of James I of England, play a pivotal role in shaping the Stuart court's royal life. Today, we turn our attention to Anna herself, a woman of striking influence known for her masques, her patronage of the arts, and her impact on courtly performance. Our guest this week is Clare McManus, Senior Vice Chancellor's Fellow and Professor of English at Northumbria University, Newcastle. Clare works on Shakespearean drama and the uncovering of women's performance in Shakespeare's time. She's the author of Women on the Renaissance Stage, Anna of Denmark, and Female Masking at the Stuart Court, and has led major research projects on early modern performers across gender and age. She's currently completing a book on how aerialists and tumblers shaped women's roles on Shakespeare's stage, and she also serves as an editor of Shakespeare, Fletcher, and other early modern dramatists. Before we begin our conversation today, I want to remind you that there is bonus history content inside the detailed show notes for today's episode. This coordinating history content is available for patrons of our show and includes portraits, artifacts, and primary documents related to Anne of Denmark, James I, as well as Shakespeare's Hamlet. You'll find it right now at CassidyCash.com/episode 400. Just click Access the Extras to scroll through the history while you listen. And now, let's step into the Stuart Court and explore the life and legacy of Anne of Denmark. Hello, Clare. Welcome to That Shakespeare Life.
Hi, Cassidy. It's so lovely to be back. Thank you for such a lovely invitation.
First things first, are we supposed to call her Anne or Anna? Because I've seen both ways, and I think different scholars actually call her both of these names. So which one is correct?
Opinion differs. You will find some people who will call her Anna and some people who call her Anne. I call her Anna because that's how she signed herself and referred to herself. She's called Anna on books that are dedicated to her, like John Florio's English-Italian Dictionary, which is called Queen Anna's World of Words. I think she gets called Anne because there's an attempt to make her English. If you think about a book like Wolf Hall, for example, Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall, Anne Boleyn, who's brought up in the French court and has a kind of whiff of exoticism about her. She's not quite English. When someone wants to insult her, they call her La Anna. So actually, in a way, calling Anna Anne is a compliment. It means she is accepted by the English. But I mean, I found it really useful to think of her as Anna, setting aside all the evidence that that's how she signed herself, that's what she calls herself, because it lets us make a break with all the 20th century history that marginalized her and trivialized her and didn't take her seriously, if they write about her at all. So calling her Anna lets us make a new start. It marks a way of taking her seriously and taking her on her own terms. That said, I don't judge any museum or gallery or cultural institution that sticks with Anne. That kind of thing takes a huge amount of money to alter, and we are in hard times right now. So I think, in a way, it kind of doesn't matter what you call her as long as you take her seriously.
If you're talking about her, that's the goal. And as we're diving into her history here, we know that she was hugely influential in court masques. So tell us about how did she shape the development of these?
I think it's not an exaggeration to say she's almost the most important person involved with them. She brings the writing and design team of Inigo Jones and Ben Jonson together. It's with those two artists that the masque gets a stage, and it becomes a piece of theatre rather than only being court pageantry. And then from there, you get one of the most important developments in English theatre, the first proscenium stage. So that's a stage that we're very used to now, with the arch around that separates us from, as the audience, from what's happening on stage. And you get illusionistic perspective scenery. So this is hugely radical, and it all happens because Anna brings these two artists together. There's a case to be made. You could argue that she's, if not the most important female performer of Shakespeare's time, certainly in the top three for the 17th century. She performs in a series of masques in the first decade of the 17th century, the first decade of the Jacobean court in England. And masques happen probably about once or twice a year at most. They're one-off performances, happen on one night, and then are sort of discarded in a show of luxury and conspicuous consumption. And she takes the starring role in a series of these in those first years. She radicalizes the form of the masque as well. We're not 100% sure this isn't, Ben Jonson flattering his queen, which he definitely should do in order to be safe. But in a 1609 masque called The Masque of Queens, he writes that it was Anna who required him to think of a foil or an opening act to the masque, something to set off the glory of Anna when she appeared on stage. And he comes up with this thing that scholars have tended to call the anti-masque. And it's a spectacle of grotesquerie or comedy or satire that comes ahead of the appearance of one or other of the royal family on stage and the courtiers on stage. So she affects it structurally as well. And of course, I think it's really important to think about her as a female performer. We hear a lot about the first English professional actresses, the first English women who are paid to perform in stage plays, who take lines, who perform in Shakespeare plays, like the unknown actress who appears as Desdemona in Othello, Shakespeare's Othello, in the Vere Street Theatre in 1660. Anna is on stage 60 years before this, and she's joined by a group of her women. And I think it's really important to think of her and acknowledge her place in the history of theatre, and to acknowledge that what she does is show us that women are involved in theatre, even when we're told that they're not.
What do surviving records show about her patronage of the arts?
I know I sound like a fan of Anna. I'm a huge fan of Anna's, but one of the most important things she does is her patronage. She's a patron of theatre companies, including a children's playing company called the Children of the Queen's Revels, and she's the patron of Queen Anne's men. So she isn't patronising Shakespeare, but there is a masque in 1611 when the King's men are the company who play at court. So their paths may have crossed. She's a hugely important architectural patron. Inigo Jones, who is the designer for the court masques, is often referred to as England's first architect. And he carries out other commissions for Anna beyond the masque. So he is master of the king's work. He's effectively royal architect. And at the old Greenwich Palace, which had been a place which Elizabeth I loved dearly, Anna commissions him to build something utterly new and radical. It's called the Queen's House today, and it's still standing. It's the only part of Greenwich Palace that's still there. And if anybody is ever in London, I would absolutely recommend going and seeing it. It's begun with Anna, and it's the most important classical building in the UK. If you imagine an old red brick rambling palace, it's this thing. The Queen's House is an incredible, bright white rectangle with classical columns and symmetry throughout. And it would have looked like it was dropped from space into this old palace. So her architecture is hugely important. One of the things I love most about Anna is that she runs a Queen's Court, a separate court to her husband, James VI First. And in it, she makes space for women. Now, she is no pushover, to be clear. She is hugely aware of her status as a queen, as the mother of queens, the daughter of queens, and the sister of queens. That's one of her mottos. But she does seem to gather around her women who she likes and who she will support. And we have a poem written by Emilia Lanya, which is called Salve Deus Rex Judaeorum, Hail, Lord, King of the Jews. Not the pithiest title, but it opens with a long dedication to Queen Anna and a group of women of her court. So Lanya sets up this feminine space at the beginning of the poem, which goes on to rethink the fall of Eve and the place of women in the world. So Anna's responsible, even if only indirectly, for one of the most important pieces of literature of the 17th century. And the Queen's house goes on to become a house, it's called a house of delights later in the century. And her daughter-in-law, Henrietta Maria, picks it up, finishes it, and packs it with art commissions. So there's a very tangible cultural legacy for the next queen left for her by Anna of Denmark.
Well, how did her presence influence the cultural and even political world? I mean, obviously, she's hugely influential in the arts, but she's also got some playing cards in the game of politics for England at this time.
She absolutely does. One of the key things to know about Anna, and I think it says something about her personality as well, I imagine, is that even though she was born a Danish Lutheran, became Queen of Scotland, and which is a Protestant country, and then became Queen of England, which is a Protestant country, she is a Catholic convert, and her political affiliations are absolutely bound up with that. So you have a kind of confessional politics in a way. She supports countries that are Catholic against countries that are not. So when it comes to, for example, her daughter, Princess Elizabeth, and her future, her marriage, Anna objects fervently and absolutely to Elizabeth being married to a Protestant prince or Protestant aristocrat. She wants alliances for her children with Catholic powers. This doesn't actually work out very well because King James is attempting to arrange a kind of balanced dynastic match for his eldest son, Prince Henry, and his daughter, Princess Elizabeth. But tragically, Prince Henry dies very young. He actually dies, I believe it's the day before Elizabeth is to be married. So that plan falls away, and Elizabeth is married to a Protestant prince, and there's no English prince to marry to balance it off. Anna is not happy with this match, and there are multiple ambassadorial accounts of how she makes that clear. She doesn't turn up to some events. She says her gout is playing up, whereas James, who actually has terrible gout at this point, is heroically present at everything. And she refuses to allow her future son-in-law to kiss any more than her hand. So there's a very kind of cold, formal welcome for them. But the rumours are that she does warm up to him. One of Anna's functions as a queen consort, so as a woman who is married to a king, is to be an intercessor, to be someone who gatekeeps between the public and the king. And what she tends to do is to support ambassadors from, say, Spain over others. So for one of her early masques, there's a long kind of tangled story about how the Spanish and French ambassadors are in a standoff. One refuses to come if he can't sit next to the king. The other refuses to come if he can't sit next to the king. James is supporting the French ambassador, and Anna is absolutely on the Spanish side. She's not at all afraid to go against the king in terms of who she favours politically. So she's a fascinating example of a queen who absolutely does do that gatekeeping, but also does it on her own terms and for her own politics and religion as well.
Are you enjoying the history you're learning, but would love to go even deeper into the archives and get a behind-the-scenes look at this week's show? Come inside the Research Vault with members of That Shakespeare Society, where you can browse all our studio research for this week's show, plus some extras from our guest. Join us at CassidyCash.com/episode 395 and click Access the Extras to dive in. How did Anna's style of queenship differ from that of Elizabeth I? Not only in terms of female power, but also in terms of performance, image, and her court culture?
That is such a good question, because Anna has consistently been absolutely overshadowed by Elizabeth throughout history. I mean, Elizabeth takes all the light of the air from the room and there's nothing left for Anna. But we're talking about one of the most important female performers of Shakespeare's day. So I mentioned that Anna's motto is that she is the daughter, sister, and mother of kings. And this is a huge difference from Elizabeth. We have a woman who gives birth to 5 children, 3 of whom live to adulthood. 2, Sophia and Mary, die very, very young, one in infancy, one at 2 years old, and they're both buried in Westminster Abbey. She comes to the English throne accompanying James with a stable family. She has an heir, she has Prince Henry, and she has the fabled spare, Prince Charles, who they do actually need because of Henry's untimely, very early death. So she brings stability to the country after the uncertainty of the succession, who's going to rule after Elizabeth. And her mode of queenship is completely different from that of the fabled Virgin Queen. She does a couple of things, actually, which I think are really worth paying attention to, whereby she demonstrates that very clearly that she is not Elizabeth. The first thing she does in the first masque after she becomes Queen of England is wear one of Elizabeth's dresses from the royal wardrobe, but she has it cut to show her legs, to show her ankles. And I think this is an amazing way of saying, yeah, I am the new queen. We all remember the old queen, but I can move. I am youthful. I am vigorous. I am healthy. I am young. I am fertile. The other thing she does, and this brings up questions of race making and racial difference, the second masque she performs in is called the Masque of Blackness. And very problematically for today's sensibilities, Anna performs this in blackface, performing the part of a black woman. If you know anything about the portraits of Elizabeth, the white lead makeup, the white face, that absolute investment in what's thought of as fairness, which is an idea of whiteness that also becomes connected with ethics and connected with feminine virtue. And it's absolutely saying, absolutely valorizing whiteness and denigrating blackness. Anna performs in such a way as to look the absolute antithesis of Elizabeth. And I think that's really interesting.
Quite bold, she is.
Amazingly.
What role did Anna play in fostering ties between England and Denmark, or even other European powers? But she is from Denmark, so how did that play in?
Again, this is a great question, because the whole purpose of a queen consort is to build dynastic connections, to be a bridge between different countries, to build alliances, to build dynasties. So we've heard about how she is not happy with an alliance with Protestant nations, but she is, despite her conversion to Catholicism, in very, very close to her brother, King Christian IV of Denmark. And in a really interesting moment, in 1606, Christian visits Anna in England. So you have a royal visit and you have the strange spectacle of 2 monarchs in the same place, because the United Kingdom is an island. That doesn't happen very often. It's not as common as it is on the European continent. And this royal visit is full of entertainments, full of spectacles. We have a report, we have a letter, we think it's a letter, an account of a masque that's thrown for Christian and thrown for James at a great house called Tybalt's, fairly near London. And this imagines, we think, because we're not sure it's a real account, we think it's a satire of the court. It imagines performing women as drunken, clumsy, over-sexualized, and it imagines the court in debauchery. I suspect that there was a performance there, but that it gets very exaggerated. But the interesting thing to me is that Anna is associated with performance, so her brother gets associated with it too, by association. And certainly those connections stay very strong with Denmark. Anna is also very pro-Spanish, which, given that England was relatively recently almost at war with Spain, is quite something. So she doesn't approve of Protestant matches for her children. She wants them to be married to Catholic dynasties. She's devoted to Italian culture. So she's a conduit for Italian culture into the country. And all of this, I think, is shaped by confessional politics and alliances. It's shaped by her adherence to Catholicism.
Anna was sometimes portrayed as frivolous, extravagant, or even politically subversive. And you mentioned a couple of times where she wasn't afraid to stand up to King James and go against his perspective on things. How much truth is there to this perception that she was maybe a little on the wild side?
Yes, it's a very good question. I think it depends how you define wild. Certainly, she hasn't really been taken seriously. She is trivialized, she is marginalized. And a lot of 20th century historians referred to her as frivolous and spendthrift, and may or may not have made some reference to her being blonde to boot as well. So, and this goes on. There was a great BBC production about the gunpowder plot called Gunpowder in 2017, which shows us James and it shows us the court. And Anna is depicted genuinely standing silent in the background and doing nothing. So there's work to be done here. She doesn't even have a monument in Westminster Abbey. And worse than that, her grave is currently covered by what the website calls a small organ. There is a temporary organ over her gravestone, and it's been there for decades. And I cannot imagine that she would stand for that.
My mind is boggled that a royal queen of England would have an organ over her final resting place. That's astounding.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And I think it's still that sense of, well, she's not Elizabeth. Interestingly, the children who died, Mary and Sophia, they have proper memorials, but Anna doesn't. And I would love just to see the organ moved.
I mean, just slide it a little.
Let's
just, I mean, at the very least, I love Elizabeth and I am totally on the bandwagon of thinking she's fantastic, but it feels disrespectful to Anna to have her grave be that way. Hopefully we will see that changed in the future.
Definitely. That would be good.
This exploration into her life is really exciting. There's obviously a lot to unpack here. And we didn't even scratch the surface of the connections between Anna being from Denmark and the Denmark that shows up in Shakespeare's Hamlet. And I'm sure there's things to unpack there as well. But if we want to look into her life further and learn some of these things that you suggest are worth exploring, where can you suggest we begin?
Okay, so amazingly, there actually isn't a proper biography of Anna yet, even though you're right, we haven't scratched the surface for the stories that I could tell you about her. But there is a great book by Leeds Barrell called Anna of Denmark, Queen of England, a cultural biography. And that tells the story of Anna's personal and cultural and political life. There's a book about the court that Anna established and ran and its material and visual culture by Gemma Field called Anna of Denmark, the Material and Visual Culture of the Stuart Courts. And then there is a book that somebody called Clare McManus wrote called Women on the Renaissance Stage, Anna of Denmark and Masking at the Stuart Court. And that thinks a lot about Anna's masque performances. But I'd also really recommend going to the websites of somewhere like the National Gallery or the Royal Collection Trust or the Royal Museums Greenwich and looking what they have to show from their collections of Anna's portraiture or the Queen's house as well. Because I think when you see this woman, you get a very clear sense that she is not to be trifled with.
It's always powerful to see the real places and the artifacts and the people behind the stories that you're reading, because it makes that human connection. And you go, this was a real person and look at what they accomplished. So absolutely. We'll place links to these resources as well as the National Portrait Gallery and places where you can go and check out digital images of the Queen's house, all in the show notes for today's episode. So make sure you stay tuned for the URL for where to find those. Now, Claire, we ask everyone this next question here at That Shakespeare Life, and that's, what's the one book you would take with you on a deserted island? My friends in England tell me I'm supposed to allow you the complete works of Shakespeare and a copy of the Bible, so your choice would be in addition to those.
That's a good question. I don't want to be blasphemous, but I might swap the Shakespeare for the complete works of John Fletcher, who is Shakespeare's collaborator and has written what I genuinely think are some of the most hilarious plays in history. But if I were to choose, let's say I take the Shakespeare, because I should, I think the book I would take in addition to that is Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea trilogy, which is an incredibly beautifully written and incredibly compassionate book that means something different at every part of your life. And I've read it for decades and I don't think I could be without it.
I think you would have so many corners of the imagination sufficiently covered with that selection, and you'd be comfortable on your deserted island with that choice for sure. Well, what's next for you? What are you working on now that you're excited about?
I'm actually doing an edition of a play that Fletcher wrote with Shakespeare, Shakespeare's very last play, The Two Noble Kinsmen, which is just the most amazing play. It kind of has everything, and it has Fletcher's reworking of Ophelia with a slightly happier ending for her. Not wholly happy, but just a bit happier. And so I'm in the middle of that, and I'm also finishing a book about the difference that knowing about women who are aerialists and tumblers make to understanding Shakespeare's plays. And I know that sounds like a reach, but I think if we think about how femininity is performed, then it's really important to know about these women who are active and bendy and flexible and who fly through the air.
Claire has been with us on the show previously to talk about acrobats and rope dancers. So I'm very excited to hear about this new avenue where we get to see the women who performed in these roles for Shakespeare's lifetime. Exciting stuff coming from Clare McManus. Be sure to check the show notes. We'll link you to her previous episode on That Shakespeare Life, along with links to her research pages so you can follow along as she publishes this work. Clare McManus, thank you so much for visiting with us today and taking us through the history of Anna of Denmark and helping us get to know her a little better and find out the role she played in the life of William Shakespeare. This has been exciting to explore. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you so much, Cassidy. It's been a pleasure.
That's it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed our dive into the life and legacy of Anne of Denmark, her masques, her patronage, and her role at the Stuart court. If you'd like to see the portraits, manuscripts, and illustrations we discussed today, remember those detailed show notes are waiting for you right now inside the extras at CassidyCash.com/episode 400. That Shakespeare Life is researched and produced by me, Cassidy Cash. Our audio engineer is Gary Mayholm. Until next time, may your queenship be artful, your masques be magnificent, and your tragedies full of insight. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to That Shakespeare Life. As always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at CassidyCash.com. Become a part of a vibrant Shakespeare conversation by adding your voice over at the website. Until next time, remember, when you want to know William Shakespeare, you have to go behind the curtain and into That Shakespeare Life.